And now, please pray with me. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Summer certainly is a wonderful time, wouldn't you say? You have a chance to, hopefully yes, you have a chance to go down by the water, whether it be a beachside, if that's your style, lakeside, a pool, maybe here in Morse's Pond, right here in Wellesley. You have the opportunity to spend time with friends and family, and of course, go on those great vacations, wherever it is that you find your rest and restoration. But then as the vacation comes to an end, there's this feeling of dread that builds up inside of you. Time to go back to the grind. You know what I mean? Some of us come back with vacation with beards. But you come back with this sense of now it's time to get back into it. We're in mid-August. You can already feel the pressure of the fall just building. If you're a parent, think of all the things you've got to do as a parent once the fall starts. No matter what you're doing, the fall is just this period of intense pressure, and when that vacation ends, there's that dread that builds up. This is the thing in our lives. So often our lives feel like the French phrase of metro, boulot, dodo. Go to the metro, work all day long, sleep, rinse and repeat. This is why Henry David Thoreau, so many years ago, said that most men lead lives of quiet desperation. None of us, of course, but those other people lead lives of quiet desperation, because we find ourselves caught in these cycles where there's just this emptiness, this lack of satisfaction, this busyness, this constant busyness. Sometimes it's really stressful. Sometimes we really feel the pressure. Other times it's just that ennui that sets in. And what do? We try and find moments that give us a little bit of hope, brightness, fun during the week. I don't know what your choice of fun is during the week. It might be a golf outing. You're working for the weekend and you're like, this week might be great, but I get to go play 18 on Saturday. Or maybe you get to go watch your kids play a sports event. You look forward to getting home at night so you can just settle down and binge a little bit on Netflix or some other streaming service. We have these various distractions, and they're good. At the same time, what happens when the distraction goes away? Let's say you love golf, and then you find yourself injured and you can't play. Let's say you run out of things to stream on TV, although that's probably impossible. Let's say your kids graduate high school and go off to college. And you have to figure out where that fun and meaning is without them. Also, one of the problems with this situation where we're in this grind constantly and just getting little bits of air as we try and get our heads above water, one of the problems with that is it also can become so self-referential, where you're working all the time, and when you have a break, you're doing something that is fun for you. But then whenever everyone in society is doing that, when everyone in society is looking forward to the next grill out that they have with their friends, and that's it. What does that mean to society when everyone seeks a break from the grind with doing something that gives you joy and doesn't help others? Or what if you're in the midst of this and you hear that voice that says, hey, maybe there's something else? Maybe you see some of the suffering in the world and you're like, maybe I can do more. What's the answer to this situation we find ourselves in? For Christians, of course, the answer is that great word, faith. If you ever grew up a Lutheran, you know that the answer to everything, see, David Otten's laughing. You grew up Lutheran, you know the answer to everything is faith for a Lutheran. For Christians, this is the answer. We find ourselves in this situation, and Christians say, well, faith is the answer. So you're all good Christians. So let's say you're over in Quebrada getting yourself your croissant, and someone were to ask you, so what does faith mean to you? You're a Protestant. What would you say? How would you define faith? I mean, I would stop and ask for examples, but that might bog us down a bit. If faith is supposed to be the answer to these things for Protestants, what is faith? Yeah, we've talked about this a lot, but it's always good reminding ourselves of what it is. One common definition of faith is faith as belief. You believe something, sometimes it's impossible to believe, but you believe it anyway, you have faith. Faith as belief, you assent to a certain creed or confessional statement. Faith as belief. Now, there are lots of issues with this in the New Testament. Paul certainly has a faith that's different than this. But what's another definition of faith that you might have, if that's not it? We've talked about this a lot, faith as faithfulness. Faith is faithfulness to God, is loyalty to God. What is faith? It is faithfulness. God shaping your life. Mid-20th century theologian Paul Tillich talked about how faith is a centered act of your whole being, whereby your ultimate concern, that which concerns you ultimately, the most important thing in your life is God. That is faith. Or H. Richard Niebuhr talking about it as a center of value, having a center of value. Of course, faith in this regard of faithfulness, of center of value, doesn't have to be just focused on God. People have faith in their sports teams. People put faith in their political parties. People put faith in a lot of things. But this is why you are lucky this morning. Not only do you come here and sing hymns and be in this beautiful space and lift up your prayers to God, but today you get to see another option for faith, one that we see in the letter to the Hebrews. I don't see the excitement, though, in your face. I mean, this is good stuff. Because chapter 11, the letter to the Hebrews, puts forth a slightly more nuanced, a slightly different view in this concept of faith. And it comes in verse 1, which is actually not in our text. What is faith? Faith, according to the author of Hebrews, is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things unseen. The assurance of things hoped for, the conviction, or sometimes translated as the reality of things hoped for, and the proof of things unseen. This is a future-oriented faith. The faithfulness, the loyalty is a present-oriented thing. This view of faith we have in Hebrews is a future-oriented thing. You have the assurance of something in the future, therefore you go out and venture to do it. You have this conviction of the unseen, perhaps the unseen future, the unseen hand of God, and so you go out and you step forth and you do it. This type of faith is a type of faith that doesn't necessarily have to be, again, religious, but it's the basis of all great adventures in the world, having faith to go out and do something, to get out of that cycle of the world. So, for instance, any scientist has to have faith in his or her vision or experiments to go out and do them. I have faith that this might lead somewhere, so I'm going to go do it. Any great explorer has to have faith. We know Christopher Columbus, for all of his many, many, many faults. The thing about Christopher Columbus is here's someone who had faith that he was going to find something when he sailed west. He had the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of something unseen as he went out west. And thankfully even though his math about the size of the globe was wrong, he was lucky enough to run into the Americas by accident and not die. Any entrepreneur, think about one of the things I respect about entrepreneurs is they have faith enough to go start something new. That assurance of something hoped for. I'm going to go start a new company. I'm going to go do it. And hopefully it works out, but oftentimes it doesn't. But it takes that faith in order to take that first step. All of us need that for an adventurous life. But there's a difference between that type of Hebrews faith, that type of forward-thinking faith, that type of adventurous faith that's secular versus the part that's religious. You see, the secular version, like if you were to start a business and you want any investors, you got to come with a business plan. You got to show the numbers. It can't just be, I'm walking out on nothing. You got to have something solid to do that with. Faith in a religious context, that solid thing that you're basing it on is that conviction that comes from God. So the letter to the Hebrews, the first example that's earlier in the chapter, talks about Abraham. The great story of Abraham in Genesis 12. Abraham is in the land of Haran in Mesopotamia. He hears the voice of God saying, get up and go. Go to the promised land, and there you will be a father of a new nation. And Abraham has the faith to go do it. He doesn't know where he's going. He doesn't know what the plan will be. He doesn't know whether it's going to work out, but he does it anyway because he feels the conviction of God deep within his soul. And then he makes that step to go do it. Again, there's no guarantee that Abraham is not just going to starve in the desert. But he has that forward-looking faith, that assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of something unseen that allows Abraham to go do it. The author of the Hebrews then looks at Moses and the people of Israel doing the same thing in the Exodus. Having that conviction to stand up and go do something new, to start something new. But it's based on God, that assurance of God within them. And then there's a list of other people who go by faith that Chris read out earlier. And of course, for the author of the Hebrews, the ultimate example of this is Jesus himself, who goes to the cross. He has faith to go to the cross, the assurance of things hoped for, that God would do something amazing. And of course, God did in the resurrection on Easter morning. This is something that's been important. This type of Hebrew-style faith has been important for Christians throughout Christian history. And it's helped change the world. One great example of this, William Lloyd Garrison. William Lloyd Garrison makes sense over there? Yes, Alex will. I'm going to start quizzing you. William Lloyd Garrison, the author of The Liberator, the founder of The Liberator magazine, the first abolitionist periodical in the United States, from here in Boston. In 1830, he starts The Liberator. In 1830, no one believed in abolition. It wasn't realistic. There was no way that slavery, which was the basis for a huge portion of the U.S. economy, there was no way slavery was going to end. This guy was crazy. William Lloyd Garrison was run out of town in various places, threatened with mobs. But he had faith. He had this Hebrews-type faith. He's like, no, this is what God wants me to do. I have the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of something not seen. God is driving me to do this. I am going to stand up against the institution of slavery because it's what God wants me to do, and I'm going to do it. And here's the thing about Garrison in this effort. It was 10 years before others really started to get on board with abolition. Think about that. 10 years. Think about 10 years from now. You start something now, and in 2035, other people to get on board. But 35 years after he started The Liberator, the impossible happened. Slavery did end in the United States. You think about someone like Jane Addams, who founded Hull House, the settlement house movement. In the late 19th century, you have the scourge of how industrialization in the United States has led to these slums in the United States and all of the associated difficulties with that. And Jane Addams felt a call from God, just as Abraham had, to go out and venture out in faith, this type of Hebrews-type faith. She starts Hull House, the settlement house movement, to work within these communities to help people in those communities. And help spark a movement to help people in need. Because she had that faith. Same thing with Dorothy Day and the Catholic Workers Movement. Look at all the great leaders in the early parts of the Civil Rights Movement. People who had grown up in the South with the fear of lynching if they had done anything wrong. And yet these same folks, the most famous of whom might be MLK, but there were so many others who, by faith, the same kind of faith that Hebrews talks about, stepped out to try and follow God. How relevant a concept of faith for us today? There are many of you I know who are discouraged by the political situation today. You feel like there's nothing that can be done. You feel like the country that you love and you love so much is slowly slipping away from your grasp. And if you're looking for a business plan or a clear plan of action to solve all this thing, you won't be able to find it. You're just one person, one vote. But the kind of faith in Hebrews is this faith of saying, if you feel a conviction of God to go out and do something, you can do your part, having the assurance of things hoped for and the conviction of things unseen. It is partly in God's hands, not just yours. You can do a small part for whatever you think God is calling you to do. And there's plenty that you can do. But even if you're someone who's very happy with the political situation today, who thinks we're going in the right direction, there's still things in society that might bother your conscience and want to draw you out. You might look at people living homeless on the streets. Now, are you going to set up as one person and solve homelessness? Probably not. And that might be discouraging to others, but if you have the faith of Hebrews, you can actually go out and do something. Say, you know what, I can do something. I'm going to assurance of things hoped for, and I'm going to step out and do something about it. I think about some of the examples within this congregation. Think of the Green Team, a great example. I mean, we, unfortunately, here in the Hills Church are not going to solve the climate change crisis. But you have the Green Team that gets together to say, you know what, we can't do that. But this is something that God is calling me, the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen, and so we're going to do what we can, and we're going to do it with hope. We're going to do it with faith, and we're going to keep pressing it forward. Or you think about when, 20 years ago, the church decided to start its pumpkin patch. Brand new thing. Oh, but everyone's so busy. Do you really want to do this? But here's this little piece where people were calling the church to do this, and all of a sudden you have this community event here on the lawn. You have a chance to bring this congregation together. You have a chance to raise funds to support our youth mission, to support the Wellesley Food Pantry, to support an indigenous community growing these pumpkins in New Mexico. None of which would have happened if people didn't have this sense of faith as we find in Hebrews. And particularly at a time like this, when you might feel that grind, when you might be discouraged by what might be going on, the answer to that is actually grasping on to this kind of faith and stepping out. What can you do? And we have this great concluding verse here. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, that cloud of witnesses are all these people in the past that have stepped out in faith within this congregation, in our society, in our great religious tradition, surrounded by such a cloud of witnesses. Let us lay aside all the things that are weighing us down. Oh, gosh, there are a lot of those. Or our excuses, or all these other things. Let us lay that aside and run with perseverance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. So I would encourage you this week to think on the heroes of the faith for you. Who are those in the faith that have inspired you, either in this congregation or the heroes of the faith that inspired you in history, in our society? Think about those people. Be an adventurer. Be willing to make your life more interesting by stepping out and doing something. And most of all, think deeply about what it means to have the type of faith that the letter of Hebrews is talking about.